This video is brought to you by you. Thank you so much for supporting. If you want to support my independent endeavor, you can become a member on YouTube or support on Patreon over at patreon.com/SaveStatePlus. Here is my first ever interview, Being Independent, with Kinda Funny's Greg Miller. Kinda Funny is celebrating 10 years, and as a co-founder slash CEO slash hot dog loving champion, I have to ask, what was it like when you realized you made it to 10 years? Greg Miller, my friend, we've worked together before. It's good to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, Destin. Congratulations. What a big day for you. I am so proud of you. This is such a cool thing to be doing. And I know you want to interview me. I want to interview you. I want to hear, how are you feeling today? This is the first piece of content you've done since hitting the button, right? And putting it all out.
Yeah. I planned it for a while and I was like, I hope I'm hitting the right tone. I don't want to come off like negative. I don't want to be like, I just want everything to just be just right. I want to talk about the core tenets of journalism, and I want to make sure they're in there, but they're not like too heavy handed and all that good stuff, you know, but the response has been very, very positive. And I still got the jitters a little bit, honestly, because it's just hitting my post.
Yeah, you jumped, right? It's funny to, be talking to you 10 years later, but know exactly what it's like for you on day one, day zero, even right here as you've hit the button. Like, I remember hitting the button and like, will people show up? Will they support? Will they understand? That was our biggest fear, I really think, in jumping out and doing all this in 2015. Different world now, but very similar, right? Of like, will people follow? Will they support? It's been so heartwarming to see you all day long giving the updates of like, we're at this many patrons, we're at this many YouTube members. I'm like, I know that. I love that. I love to see that for you.
Yeah. It's like a snowball, and then like all of a sudden you get a big jump, and you're like, whoa, I don't know what happened, but that's great. It's very, very
different
exciting
people coming
stuff.
online throughout this giant connected world. Different people mentioning it, people seeing it for the first time. Yeah, it's always so exciting and thrilling.
You might not remember this, but I remember distinctly. I don't know why this sticks out in my memory, but we were in New York at a bar somewhere with Monty and IGN people. Yeah, rest in peace, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but that was like a moment that stuck out in my memory, because shortly after you guys left, and like it's weird to look at it from my perspective, because my perspective is like, oh, those guys are like larger than life. You know, you all were like really good friends, and you were doing this or your oration or whatever, you know, on the side. And there was so much happening that was just different 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you remember the bar moments? And do you remember what your leaving day was like when you didn't come back in the office?
Like telling you guys that we were doing it?
I think, did you tell us that day?
I think so, because you're thinking of, wasn't it New York you said, right? Like,
yeah, it was like a Comic-Con or something.
What I remember distinctly about this is I don't remember I remember that Comic-Con being when we finally started letting people know, like, hey, like, we're actually going to go, we're staying through, you know, and then we'll leave in January. I don't remember the bar moment of the conversation that much. What I remember is your friend and mine, Mike Aransky, who walked back with me, or all of us in the group, to the hotel, and then in the lobby grabbed me. And he was like, I can't believe you didn't tell me ahead of time. Because, you know, Aransky was like, you know, you're basically leaving to go do what I was doing before I got here. When I think he was working, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was with Black 20, right? Where they were making like sketch videos and all that stuff. And he's like, you know, I feel like I could have given you guys some advice, but it's like, wow, and this is so impressive that you're doing. But I remember he was like kind of offended that we hadn't reached out ahead of time to him to tell him or whatever. Yeah, I remember, you know, the day of, you're asking like what it felt like on my day, January 5th, 2015. Yeah, like it was incredible. You know, I think it really was one of those, you know, knock on wood, once in a lifetime moments for us, where it was, you had that idea, and I remember the build up to it, that entire December when people started, you know, leaving to go on Christmas break and saying their goodbyes to us. And of course, we didn't want to give up any vacation days. So we wanted to get paid out. So we worked on the days when no one was at IGN. But I remember people kept asking me, like, you know, are you nervous? And I said, the only thing that makes me nervous is the fact that I'm not nervous. Like, I should be scared, but I'm not scared, which is cool. But then also, what do other people who are nervous for me know that I don't know? And so to get there, you know what I mean, and have it be like, all right, cool, we're pushing the button, we're publishing this video and announcing we're out on our own. I was so concerned of like, will people follow to the degree we need? You know what I mean? Like we soft launch, if you remember. You know, we rebranded as Kind of Funny in what it was September, maybe the end of August of 2014, and it was like. That was when we launched our first Patreon. That was when we pissed off IGN a lot. But it was also when, you know, the audience we had came out and was like, I remember the number for us was we were getting $10,000 that first day. Like as soon as we announced it, it was this idea of like, that was really the moment when me, Colin, Tim, and Nick all looked at each other like, wait a second, whoa, like they're giving us $10,000 to make stuff, and we're not even making the stuff they want. Like, you know, we were at IGN, so we were very much non-compete. We won't talk about video games. We won't really talk about current movies. We won't really talk about comic books, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was what lit the fire of like, well, man, if we went off and we did games, like they'd really show up. And so, you know, we ran numbers for a long time of like what we needed to survive and what about this and what about that and how would it all net out and blah, blah. And so like when we hit the button to go on January 5th, 2015, and it went, you know what I mean? And people just came out by the hundreds and the thousands to support us. It was like, wow, it blew our mind that it was going so well. And it really was this like, you know, victory tour. Because I think there weren't, naysayers isn't the right word, but again, 2015, a decade ago, there weren't success stories. People weren't doing this yet. We really were the first people in a degree, right? I think Jim Sterling might have beat us by a few months.
Oh yeah,
and the Comedy Button was doing one while still working at IGN. But we were the first to be like, huh?
Drucker and Altano, right?
No, Comedy Button, that was still when it was Bromley and Anthony and Altano. Okay. Yeah, those guys.
That's right.
And Ryan Scott. But we were the first to like quit our jobs and go full into this. And so people were really like, I don't know, you know, is it really going to work and blah, blah, blah. And like the numbers shot up in that first day. You know, the people on Twitch were crazy about it. And then it was this really weird victory tour that I wasn't expecting of like, we went to Patreon's office and like got a standing ovation. And like I walked in and gave this stupid speech on their table and stupid crap. And we went on, you know, we went over to GameSpot and we recorded with Danny. We did the lobby and it was like, you know, outrageous at the time for an IGN person to go to GameSpot and be on the lobby. And it was all these crazy doors flung open. And it was the same thing, you know, I was worried about the audience understanding what we were doing, but I was so worried about the industry, right? Where it was like, you know, when we were at IGN, so easy to get a copy, a code, access, to get access, preview events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I was so worried leaving that I was going to have to do a desk tour. Like I was planning a go to PlayStation, go to Xbox, go to Nintendo, go, you know, sit in these boardrooms, explain what we're doing, do the whole, you know, we're exchanging the reach of IGN for the intimacy of Kind of Funny, and it's going to be a smaller audience, but they're going to. I never had to. Everyone immediately got it. Like, you know, Xbox and Nintendo, all of them were immediately like, "Oh, this is so cool. We'd love to do stuff with you and have you on the mailers and the press lists and da 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 da." And it was like, wow, it was crazy how all of that stuff worked so well. And then, you know, shortly thereafter, it was the realities of running your own business and everything else. And you know, we were so naive, Destin. You know, we left, and I remember telling people in the office at IGN, like, yeah, you know, we're going to do this morning show, and then I'll probably take a nap, and then we're going to stream games in the afternoon, and And like, I never napped once, have never napped once on a work day. And it was like trying to make there was no Dave Toole anymore. It was me trying to make the goddamn Let's Plays work and try to, you know, why isn't it going in, and why is there latency, and why isn't this working, and the webcam's overheating, and and all those things. So it was a crazy breakneck, you want to say launch, but it has been 10 years. It's been, you know, crazy to see where we are now and how fast it's gone. And I think at the top of the show, you were talking like, no, it hasn't set in that it's been 10 years. Like, you know, I think
it's crazy. The
stream we just did, and, you know, you hear Blessing and Mike and Roger and every employee we have talk about, you know, being on the outside, talk about being a Kind of Funny fan or a Beyond fan and how that led to this and they did this and then that got them here and then suddenly they're doing stuff for us in something and now they work here and they've all been here for years at this point, right? And now we're seeing the people that are inspired by Blessing to go off and do their dream. It's like, it's just such a crazy thing of, it's almost too massive to understand what 10 years of this actually means.
What was the thing that made you finally take the leap and go for it?
You know, the story goes that in 2014, we were doing this thing where the founders, me, Colin, Nick, and Tim, would go get lunch, and we would leave IGN and we would go to Pedro's, and we would sit there and we would actually, or Pete's, and we would actually do like check in on what we're doing with, at the time, the Game Over Greggy channel, and like what are we doing for the podcast, and how do we feel about X, Y, and Z, and blah blah blah, and we started to enjoy that moment so much that there had been, rumblings and conversations of like, what if we could do this full time one day? What about this? And what about that? And finally, it was really Nick who was like, hey, I'm about to be at IGN 10 years, or next year it'll be 10 years. I might be getting the total wrong. But he's like, I'm getting the itch, and so I really do want to investigate, like, what would we do if we did this full time? And so the idea was, after that meeting, was like, come back next week with the number you need to live. Like, what do we need to make off of this endeavor for you to live in San Francisco? Eat ramen every night, but live in San Francisco. And we came back with those numbers, and we looked at them all, and we laughed because, we were part of an MCN, but again, we were doing the Game Over Greggy show, occasionally Oration, occasionally Conversation with Colin, and I don't even think those last two were monetized. I think in terms of an MCN, I think we were just monetizing the Game Over Greggy show, the podcast, and doing some merch. So we were doing like nothing numbers, right? Especially because we weren't drawing in the numbers because nobody wanted to, not nobody, only the hardest of hardcore Kind of Funny fans wanted us to talk about what we were talking about. And so it was one of those like, okay, cool, we're just not going to, we don't worry about it. We'll come back to this in a year. We'll readdress it and reassess. And like literally the next week was VidCon. And so we were getting ready to fly down there for IGN to do it. But also, we knew people and we're doing our own Game Over Greggy stuff. And when we were getting ready to get on the plane, Tim had a magazine or a newspaper, and it was an article about Patreon. And he's like, hey, have you heard of this? And I looked at him like, oh, this is that crowdfunding thing. He's like, yeah, they just got a bunch of seed money. They're moving into new offices. They're about to go big. We should look into this. And I was like, okay, no big deal. We went to VidCon. I gave a talk or whatever, and I came off stage, and I was shaking hands and, kissing babies, taking photos, whatever, with the audience that was there. And these like 3 or 4 guys walked by, and one of them did a double take, and he ran over and he goes, oh my God, you're Greg Miller from IGN, da da da. And I'm like, yeah, how you doing? Pleasure to meet you. And I looked down, and he was wearing a Patreon shirt. And I went, oh, Patreon. He goes, yeah, I'm the VP, and this. And I was like, whoa, you are Patreon. I was just expecting somebody who got a free T-shirt. And so right there, we booked a meeting, and we came back, and literally it was that first SF office Patreon had. And they were like moving couches in and peeling the cellophane off the windows and stuff. Like, it was brand new. Like, they had not even set up the conference room. And basically, we told them where we were at, and they were like, no, you don't understand. Like, we're the platform for this. Like, you don't understand. You're the exact kind of thing we're talking about in terms of creators. And so, like I said, that built to us, rebranding is kind of funny because, of course, it was weird for Nick to walk over and be like, hey, at a VidCon, like, yeah, I'm a YouTuber. Oh, what's your channel? Oh, I'm Game Over Greggy. Oh, you're Greg? No, I'm not. It's, it was like, we need something that encompassed everybody and also could, scale. And so, after many arguments, we ended up with Kind of Funny, and launched that Patreon. And like I said, you got that thing, and it was like, whoa, wait, they're supporting us this much, not doing the thing they want. And so it was at the time classic IGN where we did it. I took the morning off, and I didn't open my IGN email. So I got the approval to stay home for a half day. Didn't open my IGN email. We launched the thing. It's 100 pence viral video we're trying to get going. I'm doing interviews. I'm doing all this stuff. And then I got in the Uber to go to work, and that's when I looked at my phone. Of course, the top was Fran. Like, what are you doing? Like, what the hell, man? And it was like, you had mentioned something about this, and I said it wasn't a good idea. And I was like, I had to do what I got to do. And blah, blah, blah. And so, like, we went in there, and like I think I had a meeting with Fran, and then I eventually had a meeting with Pear, and it was very much like, whoa, we're gonna have to think about this from IGN's perspective, and we were all very bullish of like, think about all you want, we're doing this kind of thing. And it was, I believe, we were ready. We were all, me, Colin, Tim, Nick, we were all gung-ho. We were all for one for all. This is what we're going to do. And then I think like the next day, IGN accidentally leaked a Kingdom Hearts trailer, and nobody cared about Kind of Funny anymore. Nobody, like, we had to remind them like the next week, like, hey, you're mad at us, and we're not happy about it either. And it set off a bunch of different conversations that were like, tough, because it was us trying to grow, but these are our friends who have given us every opportunity, and da-da-da-da. And so basically what happened is we just cooked too long, where, we sat there, and it was like the more and more we were gassing ourselves up of like, we should do this. This is cool. This is the moment. It really was one of those of like, we could stay here forever. We could be at IGN forever. I could still be at IGN right now, right? And be incredibly happy, be about to celebrate my 18th year at IGN. But it was like, we're always going to look back at this moment and say, what if? What if we had done it? So why not do it? And so by the time, we sat down with IGN upper management, and they were like, where's your head at? And we were like, we think we're going to go. And we're like, yeah, we thought you might do that. And it was at that time, that was like September. And so we were like, listen, like, we know this business better than most, so we're not going to leave you right now, right before review season, right before the build up to Black Friday and Christmas and holiday buyer's guide and yada, yada, yada. What if we just do the year and then do a clean break in January. And they're like, that'd be great. And so, we did that. And then Colin and I came back for Beyond for a few weeks. And then I came back for a few up at noons. And then eventually that was it. We were done. And it was off to do this full time. And it was, very interesting. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't had that many breakups in my life, but this is one of them where it was, I'll never, ever, ever forget. It was after the final Up at Noon, maybe it was the final Beyond, whichever one was the one that went longer, which I think was Beyond. I was saying goodbye to Fran, and he's like, yeah, it's been great. He's like, maybe in like 6-9 months, you could come back and be on a show or like a Game Scoop or something. I was like, what? No, Fran, no, F that. Like, come be on. Oh, let's get Damon on the Game Over Greggy show tomorrow. And Fran was like, I'll never forget. He went, it's gonna take some time. And I really didn't understand it till we were out, and it was like, oh, like we're their ex and they're our ex, and it's gonna, wow, you gotta go through that place of hurting each other a few times inadvertently to really get to where you're healing, and then you're over it, and then everything's fine.
Yeah, you're the second person to sort of mention like a breakup, but it's like. And it's just funny to hear that again because like I'm very fond of IGN and my time there.
Of
like
course.
I think about getting to go. I think you were there. We went to Japan together,
Yeah.
going to Germany, traveling around the world, getting to do all this cool gaming stuff, make content that helps give the fans a voice. Like with IGN Versus, I did that when you were there,
Yeah.
or just be on the podcast. It's nothing but fond memories, but part of it is like you brought up that you were feeling sort of calm about the whole thing. And it wasn't until after my last day, I was like, I feel really relaxed.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how I had been feeling, but like going into this, I feel like it's the right time, if that makes sense.
Oh,
right?
100%, right? And it's the return of your agency. That's and that was the whole thing. Is like, I hope, and I'd like to imagine that 10 years later, it's a different kind of breakup for you. You know what I mean? Whereas like again, like me leaving and it being very public and it being one of the first to really do it, not to go to a GameSpot, not to go to a Machinima, I wasn't just switching jobs. I was starting my own thing, which came with bullish and again the agency of you're doing whatever you want, and so you're in control. And like even before leaving, there's a moment that's always seared in my brain where I went to Austin to record Gauntlet Season 2, and Tim came with me. And one night during the day in between the shoots for the Gauntlet, I did a million Gregways of just my little one-on-one interview vlog show with like Barb and Gavin and whoever else. And so we got back to the room and I started editing them, and then Tim started making thumbnails. And at one point he turned to me and he said, "Is this thumbnail okay?" And I looked at it and I went, "Yeah." And he had this moment and he just goes to me, he's like, "Isn't this awesome? Like, it's done." And it's not a knock against IGN, which is a much bigger place, but it's like there's so many checks and balances and things. And you talk to this guy, but they got to talk to their boss, and then she says that, and it's like you're this giant collaborative team where like you branch off and do this, and suddenly it's like you're setting your own hours, and the work will never be done. I think I told you this, right? I'm like, you're always going to have more to do, so you just have to get to it's a point where you're like, okay, it's okay to leave this right now to check out on this.
Yeah, that just doesn't change. But yeah. I'm always kind of like that. I'm always kind of like looking for the next challenge.
For sure, you've always been that way.
I don't know why I'm built that way, but I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I remember when we were leaving or after we had left, I forget. And I remember, all those fights I had fought about YouTube or whatever. I remember eventually talking to Fran and him being, "Oh, well, we're going to allow people to start YouTubing. We're just allow them to start doing their own thing." And I was like, "Awesome." And I'm like, "Are you expecting a lot?" And he's like, "I don't really know." And I'm like, "You will not get a lot." I think I even called it. I was like, "It's going to be Destin and it's going to be Naomi. Like, they have it. They understand what they want to do that. It's not even an insult to anybody else. It's just, this is so much work. And it seems so easy, right? Of record it, you get a thumbnail, put it up, and move on with your. It's like then when you're in the moment of how much all this takes, it's like, oh my God, that's why you see people start channels, do it for a week, and stop.
Yeah. I was silly a few years back. I said I'd do a video every day, and then it was just like recording like my reaction to the news or whatever. But people really gravitated towards that, and then doing the independent thing. It was really the FTC case because nobody was really reading those documents, and it was like me and Derek Strickland were really diving into them at the time, and then eventually, of course, IGN really started diving in. But I would read these translated 50-page documents with all this super interesting stuff about the industry between, Phil Spencer was in there and Jim Ryan comments were in there. And it's like the PlayStation lawyers and the Xbox lawyers and everything. And I don't think anybody was really covering it to that extent, like from the second it started.
Yeah.
And that really caused the YouTube channel to explode at the time. So what were your biggest challenges in the first year or two?
Man, I think for me, there's a lot of mental challenges, I would say, where I was used to being a superhero at IGN. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was the flag bearer for IGN. I was the IGN guy. I was on the thing, and it would like I would get so many emails on a day-to-day basis of this indie dev or this opportunity or what about that? And it would be so easy to be like, sure, that's great. I'm forwarding you over to Ryan McCaffrey, who's going to set this up, or Damon's going to try to get an interview with you, or X, Y, and Z, you know what I mean? Or we'll do it on Up at Noon or whatever it's going to be. And, when we started Kind of Funny, like that got dialed up to 10 times the amount of emails of people coming in. And early on, I was still trying to do everything. Yeah, we were working out of our apartment, right? Yeah, come to our apartment and demo the game and do this thing, which then led to, there is no Dave Toole, right? So it is me then trying to troubleshoot why the video isn't coming out.
Let's give people context about who Dave Toole is. Dave Toole is amazing, first of all. Dave Toole is IGN's tech person. He runs everything tech. So like if you need to hook up a new computer, you go to Dave. If you need a graphics card, you go to Dave. If you need anything related to tech, you go to Dave, and he just makes it work.
Yep.
And Marion's over there now, and they're absolutely phenomenal. But just to give people some context, Dave Toole is like if you're into X-Men, Forge. He just figures out the technology, right? And makes it work every single time. And he's looking at new stuff too. So Dave Toole's great. But anyway, sorry. I didn't
No, that's great context. Yeah. That's why you're the best in the business here, Destin, at doing this. But no, it was that idea of like taking all that on and then feeling just sinking, like, and feeling like you're failing, right? That was the whole thing of like, we left, and when we were doing it on our part-time at IGN, we were working with Kevin, of course, Kevin Coelho, who worked at IGN as well, right? And so then when we went full-time, we had to leave Kevin behind, right? It was like Harry and the Hendersons, like we slapped him and told him to go into the forest. But there was an underlying, like, we'll come back for you when we can. Like, let us get out of here, and maybe in a year and a half, we can hire you. And it was like, we obviously did so well that first month, and by the end of the first month, like, I was crying trying to get things to work, and we're like, we need Kevin, like we need to get Kevin now, and we got Kevin immediately.
Who was doing it before Kevin? Because you were doing streams.
Yeah, it was me. Yeah, so I mean, like, it's like, all convoluted and complicated, right? But like the story of Kind of Funny really begins in 2012, where I go to my first VidCon because I've just started Up at Noon, and they send me there, and they're like, hey, you need to go to this thing called VidCon. I'm like, what is VidCon? They're like, it's GDC for YouTube. And now it's like very much a fan first thing. It used to be way back in the day more about, hey, what are best practices? Hey, go and learn how these people did this with their channel, and And I was like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to go. Up at Noon's on YouTube exclusively. I get YouTube. They're like, well, at least go there, meet Phil DeFranco, meet Justine, get them to come up and be guests on the show. I was like, okay. And this came around at a time in my life where, 2012. So I've been at IGN at that point 5 years, pretty much on the dot. And I was starting to feel that, man, I want to make something of my own. Like, I want to do my own thing, similar to the thumbnail conversation, right? Where everything I do, like, I was the guy who we would go out to the bars in San Francisco, and at 2 a.m. be like, oh, I'm going to go to the office. And they're like, it's a Friday. Damon was always like, it's a Friday. It's a Saturday. I'm like, yeah, but we got the new SmackDown versus Raw build, and I got to capture entrances because I love doing it. It wasn't like I was being forced to, but it was like I was doing that thing where literally before bed, I'm sure you remember these days of like, you're getting ready for bed, you look at your phone on Twitter, someone has said something, Shuhei's tweeted something.
Yeah.
Shit, I'm breaking out the laptop. If I'm not writing the article, I'm making sure Australia or the UK is, and da-da-da-da-da. Like, there was all that it kind of dominated that part of your mind and life. So, like, that's when I looked into writing a children's book, which I did at the time. I did a manuscript about Portillo.
Yeah.
That's when I did the comic book stuff. Like, I was like, okay, try this. None of it was hitting like, oh, this is going to be the outlet. This is going to be the outlet. So I went to this VidCon thing, and I fell in love. Like, I was in these conferences, these speeches, And it was just like, oh my God, like I was already doing this stuff and not realizing it. Like, oh, like when they'd be in there, like, they put up like epic mealtime and associate them with bacon or this, and like they're like, you should have a catchphrase or in like, oh, you should have a reoccurring cadence of a thing. So when you talk, your viewers, and I'm like, oh man, it's just like how I do Beyond and how we say Baker's dozen or this that is like, oh my, or how we yell Beyond. I was like, oh my God, we're already doing this, and it's like exactly what I want, a creative outlet that would be all mine, blah blah blah. So in the airport coming back from VidCon was when I was like, I think I want to make a YouTube channel. And I was like, Fran, would that be okay? And he's like, yeah, we would talk about it and this, that, and the other. He's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to do a show where I review wings, where I just, do winging it and go around and review chicken wings. And then it was like, well, I don't know how to edit. I don't know how to upload. I don't know how any of that works. And so, that was when Nick was like, well, I can, teach you how to film. Like we can borrow cameras from IGN and I can show you how to use that. I could record it for you. Just buy pizza from me. Like, okay. And then Tim was like, yeah, and I can, show you how to use Premiere and how to put things into YouTube and all that stuff. Like, okay, thanks. And so, we came back and we did the first season of Conversation with Colin and the first season of Oration. And of course, for Conversation with Colin, I just walked in. I was like, Colin, I want to talk to you on camera. He's like, all right. I was like, all right. I'm like, great, cool. And I'm going to do this show where I review Oreos. All right, cool. And so we would go on a Saturday and record 8, 9, 12 episodes of those shows. And then I would take a day off of work and I would just sit there with Premiere. And I'd be like, all right. And I hired Matt Gravish to make my Oration intro.
Matt made it? That's funny.
And then like in the middle of the day, I would text Tim or call Tim and be like, all right, so I need to do this in Premiere, but I can't. And this is before YouTube was like, had all the tutorials. I'm trying to get it black and white, but I can't. He's like, do this. I'm like, okay, thank you. And so it was just a little personal project to do, but I was having so much fun tinkering, and it was so gamified to me of like, oh man, like one of the best practices is to be in the comments when you first publish the video. So like all those, first year, probably more, was like, hey, I publish a video every day or Tuesdays and Thursdays, whatever it was, at 6 a.m. and I'll be in the comments the first hour. So I would get up at 5:55, sit in the comments, answer everybody who is saying something goofy about the Oreo or whatever, answer whatever Colin was ranting about, and comment on that. But no, it was a one-man show for the most part. Like, obviously, Colin's co-hosting. Tim and Nick are there to set it all up, but then they just left me with drives and footage, and then I figured it all out. And so, yeah, when I started streaming, which is another thing I remember, you and I were jumping into a lot before anybody else at IGN were. Like, no, that was me all alone in the room. Why isn't this working? Okay, I'm using a Vita TV, and now the latency is horrible. I'm like, God damn it, why doesn't any of this stuff just work the way it should? But, no, it was all there. And then slowly but surely when Tim, Nick, and Colin all started to really find enjoyment in this as well, and we started the podcast, and then it was that's when it really started. Like they started to feel their own ownership of it and buy into what we were doing, and that's where it all starts to evolve.
I remember when you guys were doing Beyond and Game Scoop and all that stuff was happening, and there was a camera in the room already, and it was like this weird, awkward corner room where all the podcasts were being recorded, and I'm like, how come nobody turns on the camera?
Yep.
Like, how come nobody ever records this? So I just figured it out, and I started making sure everybody was able to record their shows and get those live. And
that was the thing.
That eventually became a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right. Like, again, we were trailblazers on that of like, it's funny how it all worked where I think that this was an argument I had, not about this. It was when I did a Giant Bomb top 10 list, my first like game of the year top 10 list for Giant Bomb. I was still very much at IGN. And I remember IGN getting mad at me about it. And I was like, you keep sending me to VidCon to learn best practices. And I learn them, and then I institute them, and then you get mad at me for doing that. You know what I mean? And I was like, this Giant Bomb thing, it's like, you go there, and it's all, there's no competitors, there's just collaborators. We should be collaborating with everybody. And Fran stopped me, he's like, that's true, but you're not collaborating with us. Like, you didn't tell us you were going to do this. And I was like, that's a good point, Fran. I am wrong. You're right. But yeah, the video was, once I learned Premiere and how quote unquote easy it was, especially for what we were trying to do, that's when I was like, I want to do breakouts of every Beyond. Let me break all sorts of stuff. Because, at the time, we were getting that from up high of like, hey, we need video views. Yeah. It's like, we're leaving them on the table by not breaking out these podcasts. What are we doing?
Yeah. And then we started doing it for all of them. It was great. How do you think games media is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? You've been doing it for 10 years. And I think about like when you guys started, it was like a locked camera shot in the corner of the apartment or whatever.
Yep.
And like, look where you are 10 years later. What's
Some would say completely overproduced, but yeah.
What are the next 5 to 10 years going to bring?
I think a narrowing of what we consider traditional games media, right? I've been doing Kind of Funny for 10 years, right? But before then, it was 8 years at IGN. So we're talking
Mhm.
about 18 years doing this. And I remember starting at IGN, and that was the 10th anniversary of IGN that year. And it was that there was this vibe in the office of like, we have proven it. Print media is a dinosaur, and they're all dying. And .coms, this is how it's going to be forever. And da. And so it's crazy to be on the 10 years later now, or 18 years later now, and be like, wow, now it's the completely shoe of the other foot, right? Of like, we are seeing our friends and colleagues and peers like lose their jobs for layoffs as everybody races to figure out how to continue to make this profitable. And so I think 5 to 10 years, it's going to be more bloodletting on that side of traditional games media. I think the good news is the ray of sunshine, the silver lining, whatever else cliche to toss on it, is stuff like what you're doing and what we do, where I think the idea of why a big.com has to lay people off and maybe close their doors or whatever, blah, blah, is the fact that you had a bunch of investors and owners come in and expect that the good times will roll forever and there will be endless growth to this. And it's a little profit right now, but we can make it a lot of profit. And when they find out they can't make a lot of profit, that's when they start cutting things, trying to make the little bit of profit a bigger piece of profit. And so when you have independent operations like Kind of Funny, like yourself, like Danny O'Dwyer, like Colin with Last Stand, you have all these places that have a far different metric for success. And I think, if there was one lesson of Kind of Funny, even if we hadn't made it the 10 years, but just how we launched and what we did and how we inspired so many other people, like Ray Narvaez always says, he wouldn't have done it without us. And I think Danny saw a lot of that in us as well, and so on and so forth. But it was the idea that success isn't 6 million subs. Success is whatever the sub count is, the view count is, whatever it is to allow you to do what you're trying to do. I think that's the biggest thing, where you can look at all these different places that have come and gone or done whatever, or the biggest things. I think about 10 years ago, the channels that were bringing down 1.5 million in 24 hours on their video. How many of them are still standing? How many of them are still getting those numbers? That was smoke and mirrors, and it wasn't building a community. And so I think games media, games coverage, enthusiast press, whatever you want to call it, right, has always been about community and always about feeling something. When I was growing up and I was reading EGM, man, I fucking loved EGM. I felt like I knew Dan Shu. I felt like I knew Crispin. Like, I'm reading these things and being like, oh man, Jen, she listens to Weezer and won Weezer tickets. Like, this is just what I'd want to do. Like, I felt that I was part of that community. Then One Up comes around and it's all based on that community. You're going and you're making profiles, do that. When I started IGN blogs are such a big deal, and it's all this blah, blah, blah. When we start Kind of Funny, it is these Kind of Funny live events. And even now, after COVID, not having had one in so long, it's the chat, right? It is everybody coming together and talking together. It is, when we record our shows privately for Patreon people in the afternoon, it is the hagglers coming in and talking about their newborn and what's going on and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all of this is community-based, and that's what it's going to continue to be, which is, I think, great and amazing, because it is that idea of, cool, you can be part of all these communities. You can have the one community you want to hang out with all the time, but when there is a hype moment, you need to go to Easy Allies and see how Michael is responding to it, right? You need to jump over there. When it is, hey, something's happening in Destiny, I need to know what Destin thinks of it. I gotta know. You jump around and find all these different things, or go to them for different reasons, interviews, podcasts, coverage, whatever it may be. Like, I think these micro communities, which I use loosely because they are humongous compared to so many others, are the future, and I think that is good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a change. And I do think you'll be watching maybe X different channels, 5 different channels or whatever, for whatever topic that you're looking for.
For sure.
And everybody sort of has that niche.
Is that what you see? Like, where do you see yourself fitting into this new landscape, especially now that you're out? Yeah.
I think about the content that I produced at IGN. I'm really proud of everything that I did at IGN. There's some stuff where like you're trying to say something and it just doesn't get interpreted the way that you had hoped.
Oh, I've had that once or twice.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had. Well, let me ask you about that real quick. How do you deal with the negativity? Even my announcement today, there's obviously some people who are being negative about just whatever. A lot of positivity though. It's been so overwhelmingly positive, and that's what obviously that's who I choose to focus on and reinforce. Yeah. Because that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that though? Like, how do you handle that? Because for you, you have 1 million followers or some crazy number. How do you handle that?
Fuck them. Like it's I mean, like I wish there was a more polite way to say it, but it's like, to your point, you just nailed it, of like, you have all this positivity, but what is going to stand out is always the negativity. It's always the person who says something. You know, today was a great example. We were doing Gamescast, and it wasn't negativity, but this is, stick with me. I'm looking at the chat, everybody's having, and one person says, "Is there a hiss on the mic?" And it's like, full stop. I'm like into Kevin. I'm like, one person is saying there's a hiss, which, you know, and then one other person said, but it's like, you gotta, like, it's so easy for the negative thing to be the what you catch on to. And so for, you know, again, 18 years of existing on the internet, and I know you have existed on the internet for quite some time as well and made content for quite some time, like
2007.
The people who just want to be negative, right? Like, cool. I know that I'm not for you. This goes back to my thing about the micro communities, right? Like, I don't want to be IGN. I don't want to be something that everyone, that actually sounds like I'm casting shade at IGN. I don't mean that. What I'm saying is, I don't want to be something that everyone finds funny, interesting, great, because this just eventually then it just becomes, well, what's the identity of that?
Yeah.
I'd rather it be, especially for us and me and the pro wrestling heel angle and screaming at people and taking my shirt off. Like, I get that that's not going to be for everybody, but it's what I find entertaining and what a lot of people find entertaining for 10 years. So you lean into that and you got to be doing what you want to be doing. I think that's the biggest thing, right? You got to be true to yourself. This entire thing, and kind of funny, but being on the internet in general, what I always talk about is we deal in authenticity. So it's like, if you love a game, you don't like a game, you say your piece about it and why it is one way or the other. And as long as you believe in it, you've done your job. Like, that's what people are there for. You know, I'm never trying to rage bait. I'm never trying to farm or click farm. Like, I'm just saying what I feel or whatever I'm doing. Well, you know, when I make fun of PC gamers, I am rage bait. But that's part of the character and the bit. I'm not actually trying to go viral for being anti-PC. But you understand what I mean. Like, I find that funny, so I'm doing it, and obviously this is how it is. But I know that not everybody is, but you can't make everybody happy. It's impossible to make everybody happy. Like, you have to make content that you're proud of. You have to make content you find enjoyable, and then you find an audience doing that. As soon as you start faking it, you're doing something just for the clicks, you're doing just something, I think you're going to be miserable, and I also think people are going to see through you, whether it be day one or day 101.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it does take time. There's a lot of negativity out there right now, and that's not what I'm hoping to create. Obviously, I talked to you about this actually on the phone. I was like, I want to talk about how a lot of people are going independent and what that is like and what that process is like and how it feels to be on that side of it. And oh, here's another good one for you actually. How do you handle? Yeah, go ahead.
Negativity, I always talk about, is fire, and it's a little flame. And so if you give it the oxygen, it'll grow. Like, I know Don't Feed the Trolls is old and has its flaws for sure, but I still think it's the best method. Because all any of these people want is a reaction, so they can then double down and keep, oh, I ruined his night, I did this thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, who cares?
There's a great video I've referenced many times. It's about anger as a germ. It's like a video made 10 years ago, and the emotion of anger is easily one of the strongest to propagate in social communities. Because once you get mad about something, it grows like a virus, for lack of a better term. And it's great. I'll link to it in the description, but it's the study of how that sentiment goes out. So you're absolutely right. Don't feed the trolls. Don't feed the flame. It will propagate and it will get worse. And I feed the trolls a little bit. I poke the bear.
It's also the thing is, we're human. Where I say all of this in a vacuum, but there are those days where I'm washing the dishes and I look at the YouTube thing and somebody said, I'm like, oh, you know, it does ruin my night. It does get me, but I don't wait. It's one of those things. All these pigs want is for you to get into the mud with them. And that's just, you don't win. You don't win. It doesn't help. It does, you know what I mean? Like, you remember back in the day, maybe, I know you were busy, but at IGN, I used to respond to everything. In the old days on Twitter, it would be, you came at me with fire. The old days, I would come back at you with fire. But then it eventually became me coming back and being myself and being nice. And then 9 times out of 10, it's a person going, hey, I didn't mean it. I never thought you'd read it. I'm so sorry. I had a bad day at work. This happened to me. But it's never about you. It never really is about you. So it's like, now I don't even engage with it because I'm too busy to do that, obviously. And also, it's like, those people need to grow up.
What's really funny is the tweets that I end up trending for, it's always a joke. I'll post a joke and then I'll go do something.
Yep.
And I come back and I'm like, oh no, What happened? What did I do?
This has been
Like
the thing with the PC.
Game Pass joke blew up, and like I used it in the promo video because it was so ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the same thing with the PC jokes I do, where I do the rants, where it's like our audience loves it. They know I'm a wrestling obsessed weirdo. They know that I play PC, so it's this whole thing. But then there always comes this thing right around 1,000 likes, where it breaks out and it gets into the PC audience that has no idea who I am. And it's, what's this guy? Is he serious? It's not that hard to do any of this stuff. PlayStation's way worse. And I'm like, I know. I'm sorry. You're swinging at smoke right now. There's nothing really here to fight. Don't worry.
How do you handle sponsorships, or like what can you tell me? Like, because I have to navigate that field, and here's my thoughts on it. I'll just let you know how I'm thinking about tackling it. Long story short, I think the audience is smart enough to know this is a sponsored piece of content. I label everything hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored, so it's clearly identified, and then they can decide to engage with it or not. That's basically my plan with it. And I think the audience is smart enough to make their own determination about how they feel about that.
You nailed it. You nailed it. That's how it's been here from day one. I'll never forget that Colin and Greg Live where that came up in chat. Somebody's like, well, what's your ethics policy? And it was like one of those where we hard stopped because I don't think we thought of ourselves as a real company. So we didn't make an ethics. We're like, huh? And it was like, well, you're just always going to know. Like, we're not going to hide anything from you. Like, you're going to know. And this goes back to the same thing I said earlier, right? Of like, we deal in authenticity. So if it was like paid review, you know what I mean? If we got paid off to say something or talk about something and we didn't say hashtag sponsored, like as soon as that discovered, we'd be dead. That'd be the end of it. And so like, for 10 years, it's been that where it's like, hey, we're obviously an ad read in the middle of the show is one thing, but I'm going to go host a bunch of panels. Hey, Square Enix is sponsoring the launch of the last thing. X-Reel is sponsoring our coverage of Game Awards, et cetera, so on. Hey, we're streaming this game. Manscaped, yeah. I don't think they're worried about the ethics of manscaping, which you should be doing. But anyways, no, it's like we're the same vein of, I think we've been around long enough. There's always somebody new who joins, of course, but you understand that I can go host a panel for something and then 6 months later review it. And I will say, hey, don't forget that I hosted a panel for this. So take it with a grain of salt if you want to. And they also know that if I didn't like it, I would say I didn't like it. And if I did like it, I wouldn't like it. It's such a thing, again, working with a smaller community that ethics aren't less of a concern. I think the optics are where we've had these conversations a bunch of different times, but it is the idea of like, you know who we are. You know how we talk about this thing. You know that we'll let you know when this happens. Like, and also the other big thing I think that we always take for granted and fail to point out maybe is that we don't think of ourselves as journalists. You know what I mean? I have a degree in journalism, and this is not journalism to me, what I'm doing. Critiquing, yes, I think of myself as a critic, and I will describe myself at sometimes when I'm trying to explain to a normal person what I do. I'll also say I'm an entertainer, but it's also the idea that, like, our review scale has gone through so many iterations already. And when people are up in arms about me giving a game a low score, I'm like, well, I'm exploring our scale. This is what the word means to us. And also, we're not Metacritic. We don't want to be on Metacritic. We're not taking it that seriously. This is just shorthand so you can see what we thought of the game. I hope you come watch the podcast to hear the entire thought.
I'm doing my first review for the channel of Path of Exile 2.
Oh, what a game, Destin.
It's really, really good.
Love it.
I'll reveal here my new review scale, and I've only told my wife, really. I have 3 scores. The middle score is 7 out of 10. So if a game is just sort of whatever, it's good, it's 7 out of 10. Anything above a 7 out of 10 is a 10 out of 10.
Yep, I love it.
It's a 10 out of 10. And anything below a 7 out of 10 is a 1 out of 10. Yeah. So it's either like it's internet scores, right?
Totally.
Because
that's one of those things
they don't listen to any nuance.
That's going to anger everybody who doesn't actually follow the content when they see it, right? But then they come in and they understand what the community is, and you're not on Metacritic. So what's it matter? Just have fun with it.
Yeah.
We're just trying to take the actual work we've done, all the words we've said or written, and give you a billboard. It's always a billboard, an advertisement to get you to come in and get the other thing.
Yeah. Like if I give it a 6, it might as well be a 0.
Exactly.
Because nobody cares about the reason I gave it a 6. Or you give it an 8, they're like, oh, you scored it too high. No, the internet is like the 7. It's basically 7 and up. If you scored anything lower than a 7, it's a 0 or a 1 or whatever. So
the anger.
Right. Yeah, that's my whole plan. That's my devious
I like
plan.
that. I like that a lot. So a 10
What?
out of 10 then for Path of Exile 2. Very excited.
Yeah, spoilers. What separates people from finding success doing something like this versus not succeeding? I think you sort of touched on it, but maybe you could
Yeah, I think
elaborate.
there's a million different reasons. I would say, I think, if you're just jumping in, it would be like you have to be dedicated to this. Like, this is a lot of work. It is going to take up and eat up your free time. Like, you go back to, you look back to 2012, like I was talking about with Tim, right? Where it's like, or I guess it might have been 2013, but it doesn't matter. We're in a hotel room in a city we're visiting with all of our friends. And we were all young and single at that time, right? But rather than go out and party, we were like, well, we got to edit these videos and we got to make thumbnails. Like, that's what I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. every other day of the week to go do this. Like, there has to be a drive inside you. You have to find enjoyment in the minutia, the little things. Like, one of my favorite things just happened out there where we have this giant spreadsheet that has all the shows planned out, right? It's how we plan the weeks to come and the weeks we're on. And to look at next week to get ready for tomorrow's meeting for the team, I looked at it and it's like, all the games casts and streams are filled in. Like, that makes me so happy. Like, just seeing the little cells filled in and like, oh yeah, that's going to be a great week of content. Oh, we're going to have so much fun doing all this stuff. Like, executing and being on camera or on the microphone for your show is such... that's 4% of the job of what you're doing here. It's all this other stuff you have to go do. So it's the dedication to doing that. It's finding joy in the little things. It's wanting to be authentic. That's harder than it sounds, right? Like, I think I'm always not shocked, I guess, but taken aback, I guess, when people will in a comments or a thing be like, oh, well, Greg's he's going to pull punches on this thing because he knows X, Y, and Z. And it's like, I know so many developers, actors, whatever, right? And it's like, it's never once stopped me from saying what I feel about a game, which for some people would be awkward, but for me, it's the job. So
Yeah.
like, it leads to moments like our 10-year anniversary stream out there the other day where one of the things was they spin the wheel and if you hit it, I have to call somebody from my phone book. And so we called Troy Baker. And Troy's like, hey, Greg, how you doing? Congrats on 10 years. Really, a 6'5" for Indiana Jones. And Troy's giving me shit because we're friends, but it's like, that I don't think I fell in the what Todd Howard thinks of me, what Troy thinks of me. Like, it's me doing my job, getting the thing done, and going out. Like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I'm not worried about Ubisoft Access because I gave Outlaws a 4.5 out of 10 or whatever it was. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things of like, I think people would pull punches and worry about access or do these kind of things, but it's like, you just got to be authentic. You got to say what you got to say and have the stuff to back it up. Obviously, like many examples.
Yeah, I think a lot of people seem to think that there's this thought that a lot of people are worried about access. And in my experience, I have never worried about that. I've always tried to be truthful and honest about my critique, but express your critique clearly. Like, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like, here's why, and then you're not really going to get in trouble with that. And if you do, that says more about them than it does about you.
And I mean, especially in this day and age, right? If you're buttoned up, if you're like, this is what I thought, here's how it went, this is what it saw, you know what I mean? All these different things. And somebody wants to cut off access because of that. I think that's honestly probably a boost for your career. Because that's the kind of shit I would go public with. Of like, okay, cool, we're not doing this anymore because of X, Y, and Z. But it's like, that doesn't happen all that often in what I've seen. I know it happens still occasionally, but then it's happening with people I don't know the full story on, so I can't take out of school on that one.
Going back to like sponsorships too, it was really cool to see Gamers Nexus like do this investigative report and pull their sponsorship with NZXT because of what they found. I think they're like definitely somebody to look up to with how they handle a conflict like that. But we should talk about Patreon questions because I don't have all day with you. What do we got here? Matthew Miller wanted to know. I know. What did Miller write?
What?
He's a comic guy, right?
Oh, no. Well, there's Mark Millar.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. My bad.
I just meant Miller. I'm Miller. He's Miller. And it's Miller.
Oh, yes. Would love to get Greg's opinion on why he thinks more and more game journalists are going independent.
Oh, sure. I think that's a pretty easy answer, right? I think that traditional games journalism pays like nothing. And also, as you see so many layoffs happening around here, right? Or just, again, full-on closures, there is a fear, I would feel, of not owning your destiny. You know what I mean? I think it's pretty funny for me to sit here and be like, oh, man, we could have still be working at IGN, 18 years later from you. But then it's one of those like, man, would we? Like, would the four of us, or Kevin, if you toss in five, or Barrett or anybody else who's stolen from IGN, would they still be there at IGN right now, or would one of the layoffs had gotten one of us, or the headcount of it, or this, that, the other? Like, I think games journalism, enthusiast press, whatever you call all this, is tumultuous, and I think that
it always has been.
Of course, it always has been. And I think it's better now in terms of payment and benefits, and I know it sounds crazy, but stability than it ever has been before, which is ridiculous, I know, to say, but I think of how much I was making when I started at IGN and how much people else around me were making at IGN. It's better, right? But it's this idea that, like, you need to own your own destiny. I think there's only so long you can see this happen. Even when I was at IGN young, right, this is how it went, of like, you could only get promoted so high because the two bosses above you weren't ever going to leave. They were founders. They'd been there forever. So it's like, cool, I've maxed out what I can do here, which means I've maxed out how much they're going to pay me, which means if I want to get married, buy a house, have a family, right, I need to make more money, which often led to what? I'm going to go into PR. I'm going to completely leave the industry. Then around our time is when it really started breaking through of like, I'm going to go make games. Like you look at like Brian Intihar with roots at, EGM and 1UP, right? Luke Smith, EGM,
That's
and 1UP, right? Tina Sanchez. Like there's all these people who you saw from our space branch out and start making games, but for the longest time it was like, I'm going to jump to PR. I'm going to go do that. I know how
Hillary
that works.
Goldstein. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that list is as long as your arm could be. Doug Perry, like they're all over there. So it really was that there were in our day very few elder statesmen or women, elder statesmen or women, period. But people who had done this for a long time and were still doing it. And I think that is a scary proposition for a job that is so many people's dream jobs, and this is what they want to do. And so, yeah, with the amount of layoffs you see and closures, like I think so many people are like, I want to do this and I want to own it. And again, we're back to what is it? Success to Destin's channel and Kinda Funny is far different than what's a success to GameSpot and 1UP, or not IGN. Anything would be a success for 1UP right now. They'd be stoked to have anything.
Totally different ball games, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Terrence asks, I'd be interested in hearing what Greg thinks about the "this is an Xbox" software approach and the prospect of making a specialized OS for handhelds. I don't know. Have you heard my crazy person?
Wearing the merch right now.
Very nice of Phil Spencer to send you a custom shirt.
I'll have you know, it was Jeff Rubenstein when I begged him.
Okay.
I was like, I don't want to pay for this. Can you send me one? He's like, oh, God, fine. Yes. I haven't heard your rant. What's your rant?
So I think what they're going to do is they're going to announce new hardware that has a proprietary OS that allows other storefronts like Steam and Epic and such, because Phil's hinted as much.
Yeah.
In interviews with, I think it was The Verge, and I think Totillo also had an interview that sort of alluded to the same thing. And what do you think about that? Do you think that's a possibility?
100%. And I think that that's incredibly exciting. I think I'm surprised that this ad campaign took so long. I'm very particular in the tech that I find super exciting, and the 4K 120 that's never been the deal for me. Gaming anywhere has always been exciting. So from the announcement of xCloud, I was like, whoa, wait, what? I remember at E3 playing it, and even Stadia. I think when I did my Stadia demo at E3, I gave it one of my Kinda Funny approved not game of the show, but this is a really cool thing. I think we had 3 things to give out, and I gave it there. It was this is such cool tech that obviously completely failed because of how Google did it, but I love the xCloud. I use it all the time. My son plays Forza on it. I play Starfield on it. I'm using it quite a bit. I'm a very big handheld remote play player. And so for so long, I've been like, why aren't they promoting this? Why aren't they promoting this? And then they do well, we're going to eventually get it on the TV apps. We're going to eventually do this. And it's it's been such a slow plan, but now where we are, where they're actually promoting it, they're actually getting it out. I had a very interesting personal use case where my cousin hit me up and she was like, hey, should I get a PlayStation or an Xbox? I need to know what to ask Santa for. And I was like, well, what games do you want to play? And she's really like, I don't know. Chill stuff, this, that, that. I'm like, hold on. And I got her Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. And I was like, you can try this right now on your phone. Just get your phone, get a controller, and do. And she's like, well, I can play Xbox games on my phone. I'm like, yeah. And you can see if you like that library, and if that speaks to you, maybe we go that way. Or just stream them forever. I'm sure you have a PC. So that was such an exciting proposition to her that it's damn, if they can really nail that message, that's exciting. And then for Complete, losers like me, the idea of, yeah, okay, cool. My Steam Deck, which I don't like the OS on, if they're going to put Microsoft stuff into, or now it's Steam OS going other places. So if Steam OS, like you're saying, is going to go to the next Xbox, and if I could have an Xbox at my house that is also playing the Steam stuff, but I'm an idiot, right, on that level of tech and PC gaming. So if this can just work and I can just use there, I don't care about the fidelity being a little bit less. I just want it all to be there in one box, and that's what we all want, right? Like somebody asked, we just streamed Freedom Wars Remastered. And somebody was like,
I jumped in.
I saw that. Thank you very much. Yeah. We were putting you over. We were promoting everything. But we were like, somebody was like, would you ever want another Vita from PlayStation? I'm like, I want another handheld from PlayStation, but I just want a portable PS5. Like, I just want everything to be one thing to a degree. You know what I mean? Whether it be one PlayStation or a dream, one Xbox that could play Steam games or whatever it's going to be. Like, that would be awesome. That'd be incredible. I would love that. And I think that's an exciting proposition in a race we're running where now more than ever, I don't know what the right move is. Is it, Nintendo doing something completely their own, PlayStation being very traditional and everything, or Xbox being like, we lost the generations, we know we'll never get you back, so we're just making a box that can do everything and you can play anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think that's their way of getting PlayStation games on an Xbox via Steam.
Sure,
and
of course.
A lot of people are like, oh, well, they'll be able to block it. I'm like, how? It's a PC. No. I don't think that's going to be a thing. Yeah. So we'll see. It's CES this week, so who knows what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and there's what I saw Jez Corden talking about some Xbox thing.
Hinting.
I'm like, all right, let's go.
Jez has a pretty good track record. BT Maverick on the YouTube membership side, another way you can support. Greg, why do you hate Indiana Jones so much, and what does it feel like being in the minority?
Well, there is an hour-and-a-half long review with clips about why it's back to what you're saying, right? Where I said it was 6.5. I said it was okay. You know what I mean? It's like, but that's lost. That's lost to the narrative. I'm wrong. 6.5 out of 10 means I hate it and it's a terrible game, which it does not on the Kind of Funny scale. More interesting is the minority question, where there's the part of me that loves it and then the part of me that hates it, where it is like, I was in the park with Ben, because that was a weird embargo of 4 p.m. And so my 3-year-old's on the swings. And I'm swinging, and I was like waiting for 4 p.m. to come around so I could tweet out the link and, hey, it's live and do this thing. And so, he did it, and I went and I did it, and I tweeted it. I'm like, great. And then I went to IGN and I saw the 9. I was like, uh-oh. Went to GameSpot and I saw their high score as well. I was like, uh-oh. I was like, oh no. And I'm so happy that I had Paris on the review as well, who's like, I am an Indiana Jones fan. I love Indiana Jones. It's a 7 to me. So I was like, all right, I'm not crazy, but it's like, this is the fun part of what we do in, video game criticism and everything else, of just like, you work in your little, hole. And it was one of those where they only gave us one code for some reason. So like nobody else on the team had one. It was just me playing. People would come by and watch me do something. Like, oof, I don't know. I'm like, I know, this, that, and the other. And so then it was then to fire it off and find out from everybody else's like, oh man, you did not have the same experience I did. And it's been fun then to look back and like read reviews, watch videos, and see people really break down why it works for them and then why it didn't work for me. You know what I mean? And I think Barrett put it, who on our team loved it. He's been playing it. And he's like, I think you were the wrong person to review it. And he means that lovingly and not like I shouldn't have.
Great.
My opinion doesn't count. But more than
anybody who hired Barrett is a genius.
Exactly. It's the fact, though, he's like, you're not the immersive sim guy. Like, you've never really connected with that. And that's what this game was. And I feel like that's why and I'm like, my criticisms and my take are all legit. They'd still be the same, right? But that is an interesting and understandable take of like, not every game's for every person. Like, I wouldn't be the person to jump on just some random JRPG, right? Like, I have to be a very specific thing. But it's the way we work and the way it went. And so it was like, it was on the one hand, like, oh, this is going to be one of those ones I don't live down. But then, honestly, I say that, and it's one of those that I felt that I was worried about that being with Outlaws, too. I referenced Star Wars Outlaws earlier in the year, right, where I gave that
That was all over the place.
A 4 out of 5, but people, or 4.5 out of 10, and people were like, you're insane. But it was then the developers being like, we're going to change these 3 core tenets of the game, and all these, like, clearly something's wrong, and people don't really attack me for it or throw it in my face, even in a joking sense. And Indiana Jones is still so current that I still occasionally get a comment about it, but really it's from other reviewers rather than the audience. I'm not really having a lot of people be like, because I did see people be like, oh yeah, I didn't like that, or I didn't like this, or this, that, the other, but it's always interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I think about the Starfield 7 out of 10 controversy. And then a year later, people are like, yeah, that's pretty accurate, actually. Like
Yeah.
once you're removed from it, you're like, I can respect
And
that score.
that's always the big part of it too, where I think so much of critiquing and rating and talking about games, for me, there always is that, well, how are you going to feel in a year? In a year, are you going to feel that that really was one of the strongest games? That was your game of the year. That was the thing. And it may be, but it also may be that like you look back and like, I remembered enjoying it, but it was the moment I got swept up in.
We got one more here from Tibaru. Question for Greg. What are your top 3 favorite games this generation? And what's your most anticipated title for 2025? That's not GTA 6.
Okay. This generation.
That's a loaded question.
I know, and it's one of those because then it's recency bias. We're doing so much Game of the Year stuff right now, right? So I'm so hung up on that.
Yeah, so clearly it's Astrobot.
Exactly
and
right.
it's
Helldivers.
Metaphor. Whatever came out this year.
God, yeah, and that's the whole problem, right? It's like I would like to not answer the question. I would like to plead the fifth because I would want to look through all my, like, what was my Game of the Year last year? It's Starfield. What was the Game of the Year before? You know what I mean? It's like I got to go through it that way. But I mean, like, so just firing things off top. Like I said, yeah, Astrobot, Helldivers 2 this year are just fucking amazing.
Helldivers great.
You know, I joked about it there, and I know I'm a crazy person, and I don't think it's a 10 out of 10. And I don't think it's a 9 out of 10. I don't think it's well, maybe not, but whatever. Starfield is an RPG I've connected with like I've never connected with another RPG. So in terms of moment to moment quality or whatever, like that's a different conversation. Blah blah. But in terms of a personal connection, I would. Miles Morales I liked a lot. You know what I mean? That's a launch obviously for PlayStation 5. Yeah, I want to plead the fifth, and I want to think about it because this is such a weird generation too of so many things that are actually like PlayStation 4 games. Last of Us Part 2, right? But would I put that there and say, you know,
what about 2025 then?
Oh, that's easy. Right now, my most anticipated game is Avowed.
Oh, really?
Like it's one of, and this is another one. I don't know. I'm just a wacky weirdo for Western RPGs.
Did you do the preview?
I did.
It's great, right?
I'm just a sicko for Western RPGs. So it's like back to it. Starfield. Greatest game of all time? Of course not. But a game I put 160 or 170 hours into now, whatever it is. Like I love it, even though I can sit there and be like, oh well, this is bad and that's stupid and yada yada. Like Avowed is a similar thing of playing that preview where it's like, yeah, all right, it's rough around the edges. Is the combat all that good? No, but it's like, wait, hold on. You know, using a spell on one hand and an axe on another, and doing this, and then the conversations and the permutations. Like, are we gonna get? That's what I want out of these, right? I want the choice and consequence of Baldur's Gate, but I want the combat of a traditional first-person / third-person Western RPG, right? An action RPG versus, the CRPG or even turn-based RPG. Like, so if I can get even a little bit of that in Avowed, I'm stoked for it. And so it is one of those that, yeah, we previewed, and I was like, yeah, I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see more. And it's every time I sit down and I pick up a controller, I'm like, I'm excited to play whatever I'm about to play, but I wish I was playing Avowed. So I'm very stoked about that.
Yeah, I only put like six or so hours into Dragon Age, but I'm like, I just want to be a dick.
Well,
like, that's okay. Can you fix it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just my ring light. I don't know.
I was just like, I wanted to be evil, and then I did the Avowed preview shortly after, and I murdered everybody. So that felt great, and I want to see how far they let you push it.
Yeah,
and like
100%.
Playing through the Mass Effect trilogy, the original Mass Effect trilogy, I usually play as Paragon first, and then I'll do a second playthrough and just pick the jerk option or like the negative option. And it's so fun because some of the things that happen, they make you feel bad, but you're also kind of like giggly about it.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's how I feel.
Yeah. See, I like the gray. I want it to be, I try to really role play and pick in the situation and do whatever. And so for me with Mass Effect, Paragon, Renegade were always, I think I just did Paragon, right? Because I'm usually a goody two shoes or whatever. But it was the idea, it always smacked of like Infamous to me. Of like, once I start playing it and like, I start, or even Knights of the Old Republic, I start committing one way. Well, why didn't we just say at the front, like, you know, auto pick all the good options? Like, I feel like it takes something out of it. I liked playing that little bit of Avowed we have where it would be like, there's 7 dialogue options. And there's the dick response, but then there's this thing because of my intelligence or this thing because of my race. And I'm like, all right, I would really want to get into this.
Last question. This is from me. It's very, very important. I know I have overwhelmingly raw charisma. But
Mm.
what does a guy got to do to ever get on Kind of Funny Games Daily?
You just did it. I mean, ask. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
all
Like, I think
right.
things are moving 900 miles an hour over here, and I got, 11 chuckleheads out there. I got Stella in the office today. Like, there's always something going
Good, good.
on. So it's like, I'm really going to, I got that spreadsheet, Destin. I'll get you on there. Don't worry about it.
All right, cool. Greg, this has been an absolute pleasure. It's just been really great catching up with you and
Great
getting to
catching up with
chat
you,
again.
Destin. I'm
It's been
so
a long
proud of you.
time.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here on the first day of announcing that I'm independent and doing this. I was going to do it yesterday, but I was like, Monday's not good. And then, yeah,
Everybody
but
hates Mondays. They're like
yeah.
Garfield around here. They don't like it.
Well, there was that whole, riot a few years back yesterday.
I mean, it was also Raw on Netflix. There was just a lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Sounds great, Destin.
It was an absolute pleasure talking with Greg Miller. A huge thank you to him for joining. Now, I know a lot of people would have liked for me to ask about his relationship with Colin Moriarty. And to be honest, I think he's addressed that situation enough. And I don't really feel like there's a lot more to add, namely because he's addressed this in the past. 7 years ago, he wrote the following, and I'll just read it to you. And I feel like it's a very lovely sentiment and thought about where he comes at the whole situation from. This is his perspective and his words. Hey, thank you all for your concern here and on the handful of threads that have popped up like this over the past few weeks since Colin reached out to me privately over text. I prefer to keep it between us, but as it pops up every so often here on this subreddit, yes, I see everything. It's time to talk to you about it. When Colin left Kind of Funny, he and I broke up. Our relationship ended. Now, I'm sure many of you have negative emotions tied to a breakup. That's not this, but I'll get to that. You see, the Wednesday to Monday stretch in 2017, when everything went down, was made up of the worst days of my life. There was anger, heartbreak, and emotions that turned on a dime as I sleepwalked through one of my favorite times of the year, PAX East. The days were followed by Bostonian nights spent sobbing in Jen's arms, the lingering question if there'd be a Kind of Funny in a month, and the terrible, albeit fleeting thought that I might not be strong enough to go on if it all went south. Of course, none of the worst case scenarios came to be. Colin and Kind of Funny parted ways amicably. The crew and I soft rebooted the business, and today I honestly believe we're making the best stuff we ever have. For sure, I'm making the best content of my career. That took time to get to. It took time to get to this place. So when Colin reached out in February wanting to talk, I told him the truth from the bottom of my heart, and I'll tell you the same right now. I'm glad he's doing well. I'm glad he came back to games, and I look forward to running into him at an event and catching up. However, that's all I can give him. It took a long time to get here, and my personal journey on that front meant that I closed that chapter in my life when our relationship ended. I'll forever be in Colin's debt for the partner he was, the friend he was, and the business he helped create. But I have to move on. Doing that means that I can't hold on to the past. Colin left. That chapter is closed. I know this isn't the answer a lot of you want to hear. I'm sorry for that, but this is what I needed. Some will attack me for this. They'll toss out the belief that I've lied by reminiscing on shows since then about something Colin said or did, so I need to be as clear as possible here. I have nothing but love for Colin and great memories of living and working with him. You can end a relationship much like the end of the DC Marvel crossover in the 90s by shaking hands, wishing each other well, and moving on to the next adventure life has. For me, that moment was when I teared up, grabbed his hand, and said goodbye in his final Game Over Greggy show. That's where I closed the book, reflected on the good times, and moved on to the next chapter. I love you all. Greg, a.k.a. Flapjack. Now, the reason I didn't want to talk to him about it is because Colin has also discussed the fact that he has reached out privately when Portillo passed. Portillo was a dog that Greg had for many years. And, anybody who knows Greg knows about Portillo. And it's left up to them as friends. Greg has addressed the situation. I don't feel like it's helpful or valuable to retread old ground. I think this is a lovely letter that explains his perspective about the whole situation. And when he and Colin are ready to have a public conversation or do something together, if that day ever comes, that's really up to them. So I just wanted to address that real quick and be real upfront about it. And Greg was great. He talked about Colin a ton. He even talked about Last Stand Media in this video discussion. I do greatly appreciate his candor and forthrightness with where he's at today with everything. Thank you so much for watching. I do greatly appreciate you understanding. And I have a pretty significant new thing I have to do because there's a ton of patrons who I need to shout out by name. Christopher, Inner Machine, Savage, Spin Getter, The Scarecrow, Adam, Lily Gray, Phil Aroni, Senju Genix, and on YouTube, Chris Perez, Poloski, Twin Turbo, Camzilla, Varsha Iyer, Mark D, Servaj, Nick Castillo, Hargeet Chani, who backed while I was recording this, and of course, all of the other patrons and members on YouTube who back at any level. You're helping make this possible. Thank you so much. If you want to support, you can do so by going to patreon.com/SaveStatePlus. That's how you can support the channel. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can just click the join button and support at your selected level of membership. Thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate all of you, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.